"It wasn't me. I swear on my life I didn't kill Dr. Montez." Mrs. Aurora's desperate cry echoed through the courtroom, shattering the tense silence. Judge Carolina, young and tormented, observed the overwhelming evidence, feeling the weight of the final decision press upon her chest. The relentless prosecutor was already preparing his closing statement, sealing the elderly woman's fate. But suddenly, a dark shape burst through the window, a pair of astute eyes sweeping the room before dropping a shiny metallic object onto the floor, right at the witness's feet. And what it revealed would forever change the course of justice. The shiny metallic object lay on the floor, an unexpected point of light in the gloom of the courtroom. A silence even heavier than before fell upon everyone, replacing the initial shock with an almost palpable curiosity. The crow, with its dark plumage and intelligent eyes, hovered for an instant over the spot, as if assessing the impact of its intervention, before taking flight again and disappearing through the same window it had entered, leaving behind a trail of mystery and an enigmatic object. Mrs. Aurora, who until then seemed resigned to her fate, raised her head, her tear-filled eyes fixed on the spot where the crow had been. A flash of recognition and a faint flicker of hope shone in her tired gaze. It was him, her winged friend, Corvo, the same one she had fed for years with breadcrumbs and silent conversations in her small backyard. She never imagined that the loyalty of that creature could manifest in such a surprising, such providential way. Judge Carolina, her heart pounding in her chest, felt a wave of conflicting emotions. It was absurd, an unacceptable interruption, but at the same time, a persistent voice in her mind whispered that it was no mere coincidence. Her eyes, previously fixed on the evidence that seemed to crush Mrs. Aurora, now turned to the small object on the floor. The prosecutor, visibly irritated by the dramatic interruption, cleared his throat, ready to demand the removal of the distraction, but the judge's authoritative posture made him hesitate. "Bailiff, please retrieve the object," Carolina ordered, her voice firm but with an almost imperceptible tremor. The bailiff, a burly man with years of courtroom experience, approached cautiously, as if the pin might explode at any moment. He bent down, picked it up with 2 fingers, and brought it to the judge's bench. In Carolina's hands, the object revealed itself to be a lapel pin, elegantly crafted in silver metal, with a small engraving that looked like a miniature crest. She recognized it immediately. It was the pin that Dr. Elias Montez wore almost daily, a peculiar accessory that had become one of his trademarks. A shiver ran down the judge's spine. Why would Mrs. Aurora's crow bring precisely that pin? And why would Dr. Montez, such a meticulous man, lose it? As she turned the pin between her fingers, Carolina felt a small click. A tiny slit opened on the side, revealing a hidden compartment. Her heart raced. It wasn't just a pin, it was something more. Her eyes widened. A device so small, so disguised. Could it be? A recorder? The idea seemed far-fetched, worthy of a novel. But Carolina's intuition, the same one that cried out for Mrs. Aurora's innocence, now screamed with undeniable force. The truth was there, perhaps hidden in that small object, waiting to be heard. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, and Mrs. Aurora's fate, and perhaps the very reputation of justice in the small town, depended on what that pin might reveal. Carolina's heart accelerated. That tiny compartment, the disguised technology, seemed like a miracle. Her fingers, previously steady, trembled slightly as she tried to understand the mechanism. There were no obvious buttons, just a smooth metallic surface. The room, once a cauldron of tensions, now seemed suspended in time, every gaze fixed on her, on the pin. The prosecutor, Dr. Almeida, cleared his throat, impatience evident on his face. The judge, however, would not be swayed. "Your Honor, with all due respect, we cannot allow a strange object brought by a bird to divert the focus of this trial. I ask that we proceed." Judge Carolina raised her eyes, meeting Mrs. Aurora's gaze. The elderly woman with wrinkled hands seemed to have found a thread of hope. Her eyes, previously dulled by resignation, now shone with a silent plea. Carolina felt a weight in her chest, an immense responsibility. Her intuition, the one that had bothered her, screamed that the key was there. She could not ignore it. With a decisive movement, she ignored the prosecutor and turned her attention back to the pin. There was a small groove on the side. With the tip of her fingernail, she gently pressed. A small panel slid open, revealing a tiny connector and an even smaller button. A collective gasp swept through the room. It was a recorder. The confirmation brought a mix of relief and dread to Carolina. Relief that her intuition had not deceived her. Dread for what the recordings might reveal. She knew that this moment was a watershed. "Bailiff," her voice sounded stronger than she expected, "please provide an audio amplifier and a compatible cable. Urgently." The bailiff, still stunned, nodded and hurried out of the room, leaving a trail of anticipation. The minutes that followed were an eternity. The murmur in the room grew, but was quickly silenced by a firm look from the judge. Mrs. Aurora watched every movement, every expression, as if her life depended on it, and indeed it did. The prosecutor, though visibly displeased, remained silent. Perhaps intrigued, perhaps fearing what was to come. The tension was palpable, almost suffocating. Carolina felt cold sweat trickle down her back, but her determination was unwavering. Justice, she thought, sometimes manifests in mysterious ways. When the bailiff returned, carrying a small amplifier and a cable, all eyes fixed on him. He connected the pin to the device, and the judge, with a wave of her hand, indicated that he should activate the recorder. A small red LED lit up on the pin, and a soft hiss filled the silence of the room. It was the sound of an old recording, muffled by time. Carolina closed her eyes for an instant, taking a deep breath. Mrs. Aurora's fate, Dr. Montez's honor, and the truth were about to be unveiled. Then a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakable, began to emerge from the hiss. It was the voice of Dr. Elias Montez. The entire room held its breath. The first word, almost a whisper, seemed to carry the weight of a long-kept secret. "No, I can't do this!" The voice continued, and each syllable seemed to echo off the courtroom walls, revealing fragments of an unexpected conversation. The prosecutor's face paled. Mrs. Aurora, with wide eyes, brought her hands to her mouth, a mixture of shock and relief etched on her face. The truth was beginning to unfold, word by word, before everyone. "No, I can't do this." Dr. Elias Montez's voice, choked with anguish, filled the silence of the courtroom. Carolina felt a chill. That was not the voice of the influential man, but of someone cornered. A brief hiss, and then another voice, younger, cold and calculating, burst from the amplifier. "Don't be foolish, uncle. It's our future, your money, our freedom. Old Aurora means nothing, and no one will suspect her. It's the perfect solution." It was Gustavo, Dr. Montez's nephew, always respectful, but whose eyes Carolina had found empty. Mrs. Aurora let out a muffled groan. The prosecutor, Dr. Almeida, pale, fixed his eyes on the amplifier in disbelief. The recording continued, merciless, revealing cruelty and greed. "She's always been a thorn in our side, with her stories and meddling. Now she'll pay for everything. No one will question the guilt of a grumpy old woman who always envied your success." Gustavo's voice dripped with venom. "And with you out of the way, uncle, the entire inheritance will be mine. No one will even suspect." Dr. Montez tried to argue, his voice weak. But she's innocent, and I don't want this, Gustavo." His nephew's response was a dry, cruel laugh. "You're already in, Uncle. There's no turning back. Either you cooperate or the consequences will be worse for you." The threat was veiled, its weight undeniable. The silence in the recording was laden with terror. Carolina felt a knot in her throat. Her intuition materialized in audio. Mrs. Aurora, the humble elderly woman, was being used as a scapegoat in a diabolical plan. Tears streamed down the elderly woman's wrinkled face, no longer from despair, but from profound shock and liberation. Prosecutor Almeida, his face contorted in disbelief and fury, mumbled something inaudible. His composure crumbled before the truth. The audience, in sepulchral silence, absorbed the confession. Gustavo's voice returned, more incisive. "The plan is simple. I'll arrange everything to make it look like she was here, at your house. The fingerprints, the evidence will plant. No one will doubt it. And the pin, well, the pin will be your security. In case something goes wrong. But nothing will go wrong, Uncle. You'll sign the inheritance papers and then the old woman will pay the price." The recording continued, Dr. Montez's voice growing weaker, Gustavo's dominant and sinister. Carolina closed her eyes, processing the magnitude of the revelation. Justice, she thought, finds the most improbable messengers. A crow, a pin, a hidden truth. Her faith in humanity, shaken, began to be restored. Mrs. Aurora's innocence was no longer intuition, but a screaming truth that echoed throughout the courtroom. That recorder was the voice of heaven, irrefutable proof that unmasked evil and brought light into the darkness. The last echo of Gustavo's cold, calculating voice silenced in the courtroom, leaving a heavy vacuum, filled by the gasping breaths of those present. The truth, once a whisper in Carolina's intuition, now screamed from every corner of the room, stripping bare the evil with painful clarity. Judge Carolina raised her eyes from the pin, which still rested connected to the amplifier, and swept the room. Her gaze, once questioning, now reflected unwavering certainty. Prosecutor Almeida was livid, his hands trembling slightly on the table, his eyes fixed on Gustavo, a mixture of disbelief and fury contorting his face. Gustavo, Dr. Montez's nephew, who had been sitting in the audience with false condolence, was now in shock. His eyes, previously empty and dissembling, widened in panic, revealing the terror of someone caught red-handed. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair with a crash, as if intending to flee the overwhelming weight of the evidence. But the gazes of all present, laden with fury and repulsion, held him in place. Gustavo tried to stammer something, a desperate denial, but the words were lost in a pathetic choke, revealing his total demoralization. Mrs. Aurora, for her part, broke down in silent tears. They were not of sadness, but of an overwhelming liberation that flooded her soul. The weight of an unjust accusation, which had oppressed her for weeks, finally dissipated like mist in the sun. She looked at Judge Carolina, a mixture of immense gratitude and profound relief on her wrinkled face, her tear-filled eyes shining with a new light. That crow, her winged friend, whom she had fed with affection, had been the most improbable and providential instrument of her salvation. It was living proof that kindness at times returns in mysterious ways. Prosecutor Almeida, recovering from the shock, slammed his hand on the table, his voice choked with emotion and a newfound professional shame. "Your Honor, in light of this irrefutable and shocking evidence, I request the immediate arrest of Mr. Gustavo Montez for murder, premeditation, and attempted incrimination of Mrs. Aurora. And I ask for forgiveness from the bottom of my soul and in the name of justice to Mrs. Aurora for having doubted her innocence and for having contributed to her suffering. His words, laden with sincerity and regret, resonated in the courtroom. Carolina nodded, her voice firm and clear, echoing the authority and dignity that the situation demanded. "Bailiff, arrest Mr. Gustavo Montes for all the crimes the recordings have revealed, and let the formal retraction of the prosecution be recorded in the minutes, a gesture of humility that honors justice. Mrs. Aurora." She turned to the elderly woman, a gentle smile and a look of profound respect on her face. "You are free. Your innocence has not only been proven, but reaffirmed in a more than extraordinary way. A true miracle." A murmur of relief and celebration swept through the room, transforming the tension into a wave of positive emotion. Some people in the audience applauded, others cried openly, touched by the turnaround. Justice, which by a thread seemed to deviate into darkness, had been fully restored. Gustavo, now handcuffed, was led out of the room, his eyes downcast, his arrogance replaced by pathetic despair and public shame. Carolina watched the scene, her heart light and her soul at peace. That day would be marked not only in her career, but deeply in her soul. Her faith in truth, in the inherent goodness of people, and in the human capacity for overcoming adversity, which at times seemed fragile, had been reaffirmed in a way she would never forget. Mrs. Aurora, with her head held high and her shoulders relaxed, seemed to have rejuvenated years, the dignity that the accusation had tried to steal from her now shining with renewed intensity, a beacon of hope. The judge knew that the story of that trial, of the crow and the pin, would be told for a long time in the small town, passed from mouth to mouth. It would be a constant reminder that truth, however hidden, always finds its way to light, sometimes through the most improbable and unexpected messengers. And that human connection, the altruism of an elderly woman who fed a crow, could move mountains, unravel the darkest plots, and restore faith in justice. The future seemed brighter for everyone, and hope, once almost extinguished, blossomed again, stronger than ever. The immediate aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind of emotions. Mrs. Aurora, still with tears streaming down her face, felt her legs weaken. Freedom, once a distant dream, was now a tangible reality. She couldn't stop looking at Judge Carolina, whose tear-filled eyes met hers. In that instant, a deep and silent connection was established, forged by adversity and the pursuit of truth. It was a bond of gratitude and mutual respect, transcending the formality of the courtroom. Carolina, in turn, felt immense relief, as if a gigantic weight had been lifted. That trial, which threatened to tarnish her young career and shake her faith in justice, had transformed into a powerful testament to human resilience and truth emerging, even in the most improbable circumstances. She descended from the bench, ignoring protocol, and walked towards Mrs. Aurora. She extended her hand, and the elderly woman held it firmly. "You are a woman of strength, Mrs. Aurora. Your kindness has been rewarded," Carolina said, her voice choked with emotion. News of the turnaround spread like wildfire through the small town. People who had previously whispered and judged Mrs. Aurora now felt shame and admiration. The injustice almost committed served as a mirror, reflecting the ease with which one judges without knowing the truth. Many approached, offering sincere apologies and support. The elderly woman, with her humility, accepted each gesture with a tired but genuine smile. She held no grudges, only gratitude for having her dignity restored. That night, in her small backyard, Mrs. Aurora sat in her rocking chair, her heart light. Corvo, her winged friend, perched on a nearby branch, watching her. She smiled, knowing he was the true hero, the improbable messenger who had unveiled the darkness. "You saved me, my friend," she murmured, and the crow seemed to tilt its head. That act of altruism, of feeding a creature without expecting anything in return, had come back in a way that defied logic, reaffirming the beauty of the connection between living beings. Carolina, in her office, reviewed documents, but her mind was far from the papers. She thought of Mrs. Aurora, of the silent strength of that woman, and of the lesson the Crow had taught. Justice was not just laws and procedures, it was also intuition, empathy, and the ability to look beyond the obvious. She promised herself never again to let her intuition be stifled by superficial evidence. That case had shaped not only her career, but her worldview, making her a more human judge, more attentive to the whispers of truth. The following days were for Mrs. Aurora a period of rebuilding and healing. The community, united in solidarity, helped her repair her home and lift her spirits. She returned to tending her garden, planting new seeds, a symbol of a fresh start. The pin, the small recorder that changed everything, was kept by Carolina as a relic, a constant reminder that truth finds improbable messengers. The story of the Crow and Justice became a legend in the town, a tale that inspired everyone to believe in kindness, resilience, and the power of hope. Life went on, richer in meaning, fuller of faith, and with the certainty that good, in the end, always prevails. Renewed hope permeated the small town, transforming every conversation into an echo of the extraordinary courtroom turnaround. The story of Mrs. Aurora, the Crow and the Pin, was already a living legend, retold with fervor. People, once quick to judge, now sought out Mrs. Aurora with deep respect and admiration. Her home, once a refuge, became a point of pilgrimage. Neighbors brought cakes, flowers, and offered help with her garden. Mrs. Aurora's wrinkled hands, once trembling, now received hugs and words of affection. She smiled, but behind the gratitude, a subtle shadow began to form. Judge Carolina observed from afar, from her office window, the movement on the street leading to Mrs. Aurora's house. She felt proud of the justice served and the elderly woman's courage. The Montez case had shaped her, making her stronger, more intuitive, more connected to the human essence behind the laws. The pin, kept in a small velvet box, was a constant reminder. However, Carolina realized that Mrs. Aurora's new reality, though affectionate, was not without its challenges. The elderly woman, accustomed to solitude and a simple routine, seemed a little lost in the avalanche of attention. One afternoon, Carolina decided to visit Mrs. Aurora. She found her on her porch, the Crow perched on the railing, a silent guardian. There was a basket of fresh fruit and a bouquet of daisies. Mrs. Aurora looked tired, her eyes distant, despite her welcoming smile. "It's a lot of people, my dear," she confessed, her voice soft. "Everyone is so kind, so full of affection. But I miss my silence, my time with Corvo, just the two of us." She stroked the bird's dark feathers, and it tilted its head, as if understanding. Carolina squeezed Mrs. Aurora's hand, a gesture of understanding. "I understand, Mrs. Aurora. It's a blessing, but also a burden, isn't it? Being the center of attention, even for a noble reason, can be exhausting." The judge knew well the pressure of other people's eyes. The town, though small, had an insatiable appetite for stories and heroes. Mrs. Aurora, the woman the Crow had saved, had become a symbol, and symbols carry an unexpected weight. The Crow took flight, circled the garden, and landed again, closer to Mrs. Aurora, touching her shoulder. It was a gesture of comfort, of unwavering loyalty. She smiled at him, a more genuine smile. "He always understands me," she said, her eyes welling up. "I think he knows I just wanted my peace back." That was the turning point. Liberation from an injustice had led to a new, unexpected social imprisonment. The community's kindness, paradoxically, suffocated the peace Mrs. Aurora so cherished. Carolina realized that the elderly woman's journey and her own still held nuances about the true meaning of freedom and happiness. Overcoming was not a destination, but a continuous path, full of silent challenges. Mrs. Aurora, with a sigh, looked at the garden, where new seeds were sprouting. She needed to find a way to honor the town's gratitude without losing herself, without her essence dissolving into others' expectations. The crow, with its discreet presence, was a constant reminder of her nature and the value of true silence. The judge, by her side, felt the weight of this new understanding. Justice had been served, but life, in its complexity, always presented new labyrinths, new ways to test the resilience of the human spirit. This was the new challenge, as subtle as it was profound. This was the new challenge, as subtle as it was profound. Mrs. Aurora felt the weight of a benevolence that, though sincere, suffocated her. The days after the trial transformed her home, once a refuge of peace, into a constant visiting point. Neighbors and curious onlookers, with the best intentions, stole the quietude she so cherished. Her eyes, once bright with relief, now showed a weariness that the joy of freedom could not erase. She tried to be gentle, but her energy was draining. The crow, her faithful companion, seemed to sense her anguish. He watched her from the mango tree branch, or perched on her shoulder on the porch, offering a complicit silence worth more than 1,000 words. He was the only one who understood her need for space, for her solitary routine, away from the unexpected spotlight. Carolina, in her office, couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Aurora. The irony was palpable. Justice had triumphed, but the innocent woman's inner peace was still at stake. The judge, who had fought vehemently, confronted a more complex emotional truth. Freedom, she reflected, was not just the absence of chains, but the ability to live in harmony with one's own soul. One afternoon in the town square, Carolina saw Mrs. Aurora at the market. The elderly woman was surrounded by a group of people, all talking at once. Mrs. Aurora smiled and waved, but Carolina noticed how tightly she held her shopping bag, her shoulders slightly slumped. A tired smile was etched on her face, and the judge perceived the tension. The town's kindness, well-intentioned, was an embrace that was too tight. That night, Carolina decided she needed to act. Justice, for her, had become something more comprehensive. It wasn't enough just to exonerate. It was necessary to ensure that the exonerated person's life could flourish. She thought of the values that guided her: altruism, human connection, overcoming adversity. Mrs. Aurora had demonstrated all of them, and now it was Carolina's turn to reciprocate. Mrs. Aurora, back in her backyard, felt the weight of the night and the quiet she longed for. The crow was on its usual perch, a dark silhouette against the starry sky. She sat in her rocking chair, exhausted, and looked at the stars. "My friend," she whispered, "how do I get my little corner back, my peace?" The crow let out a soft caw, almost a reply. Carolina, at home, began to sketch out ideas. She thought about how she could subtly help Mrs. Aurora rediscover her peace. Perhaps a conversation with the priest or community leaders, not to push people away, but to channel their goodwill while respecting the elderly woman's reserved nature. Overcoming, she understood, was not just about conquering an obstacle, but learning to live with its consequences. Mrs. Aurora, at dawn, felt a gentle breeze. She rose, determined. She couldn't be rude, but she could be firm. She needed to re-establish her boundaries for herself and for her soul, which yearned for serenity. The garden awaited her with seeds of a new beginning, and the crow on its branch seemed to approve. That day would be the start of a new chapter, where freedom would be shaped by the presence of her own will and inner peace. Mrs. Aurora, at dawn, felt a gentle breeze. She rose, determined. She couldn't be rude, but she could be firm. She needed to re-establish her boundaries, for herself and for her soul, which yearned for serenity. The garden awaited her with seeds of a new beginning, and the crow on its branch seemed to approve. That day would be the start of a new chapter, where freedom would be shaped by the presence of her own will and inner peace. With a sigh of renewed determination, Mrs. Aurora prepared her coffee. The crow, with a discreet caw, landed on the windowsill. She smiled, a lighter smile. "Today, my friend," she murmured, "we will sow peace again." The first visitor arrived with the sun. Mrs. Lucia, the neighbor, brought a pie. "Good morning, Aurora. The town is happy about your freedom." Mrs. Aurora smiled, but delicately held Lucia's hand. "Thank you, Lucia. But today I need some time for myself, for my garden, my soul. How about you come back tomorrow for tea?" Lucia, surprised but understanding, nodded. "Of course, Aurora. I understand. See you tomorrow." It was a small step, but for Mrs. Aurora, it meant the world. In her office, Judge Carolina was already acting. She called Father Antonio, a respected figure. "Father, Mrs. Aurora is exhausted with so much attention. The town's kindness is immense, but she needs space. Could we organize a day for visits or channel this energy into something that helps her without suffocating her?" The wise priest understood. "My dear, the soul needs quietude. I will speak to the community. I will suggest that, instead of constant visits, people contribute to Mrs. Aurora's garden, or leave messages and flowers on her porch, respecting her time." In the garden, Mrs. Aurora felt the fertile earth. She planted sunflower seeds, imagining the flowers seeking their own light. The crow flew above her, landing on a branch, observing her with intelligent eyes. She felt a renewed strength, an overcoming that went beyond the trial, that of defending her right to peace. The priest's message spread. People, though disappointed, understood. Respect for the elderly woman outweighed curiosity. Baskets of vegetables, flowers, and affectionate notes began to appear on the porch. Mrs. Aurora's house, little by little, returned to being a sanctuary, blessed by the community's gratitude and affection, delivered with respect. Carolina, seeing the change, felt a warmth in her chest. Justice was not just sentences, but individual care. Mrs. Aurora, with her simplicity and resilience, had taught everyone about true freedom and the importance of honoring oneself. The crow, in its silent flight, was the guardian of this new peace. On the porch at dusk, Mrs. Aurora watched the sunset. The crow was on her shoulder, its feathers caressed. The basket of flowers, the affectionate notes, bore witness to a community that had learned to love in a new way. She smiled, a full and true smile. Peace, finally, had returned to her heart, richer and deeper than ever. Peace, finally, had returned to her heart, richer and deeper than ever. Mrs. Aurora now walked through her garden with light steps, the serene smile that the accusation had stolen, restored. The sunflower seeds she had planted sprouted vigorously, mirroring the renewal of her soul. The crow, her winged friend, was no longer a messenger of urgency, but a silent companion, perching on her shoulder as she watered the flowers, or observing her from the top of the mango tree, a faithful guardian of the regained quietude. The community, learning from the wisdom of Father Antonio and Judge Carolina, had found a new way to show affection. Baskets of fruit and vegetables appeared on the porch, with notes of admiration and sincere apologies. No one knocked on her door anymore, respecting her time and space. She read each note with gratitude, feeling the human connection, more genuine and less suffocating. In her office, Judge Carolina felt deep satisfaction. The pin kept in its velvet box was not just evidence, but a talisman of her journey. It reminded her that justice went beyond codes and evidence. It resided in attentive listening, intuition, and the courage of the heart. That week, a land dispute case, previously handled with legality, was approached with sensitivity. Carolina sought to understand the emotional roots of the conflict, the stories behind the fences, and achieved conciliation, uniting the parties. Her approach had become more human, more complete. The young judge, once merely an enforcer of the law, now saw herself as a bridge builder, a restorer of social ties. Mrs. Aurora, in turn, began to build bridges. With peace re-established, she found time to visit sick neighbors, bringing herbal tea or words of comfort. Her garden, once merely a refuge, became a source of donations for the church fair, with fresh vegetables and flowers. She did not seek the spotlight, but her discreet kindness radiated touching hearts. The neighborhood children, once shy, now sought her out with curiosity to hear stories of the crow, learning to be gentle and to seek the truth. The crow at times perched on her shoulder during conversations like a silent co-narrator, a winged hero. The small town, once shaken by scandal, flourished under a new and promising light, a testament to resilience. The story of Mrs. Aurora and the crow was no longer just a legend, but a living reminder that overcoming was not only about victory against adversity, but about the dignified and inspiring way of living after victory. Faith in justice and human kindness had been reaffirmed, uniting the community, more attentive to each other's needs, cultivating solidarity and respect for others. Human connection, once fragmented, now strengthened in gestures of altruism and mutual understanding, weaving a genuine support network. Carolina, at the end of a workday, observed the full moon from her office window. She thought of Mrs. Aurora, of the elderly woman's resilience and the wisdom she, so simple, had shared. That trial, which seemed like the end, had been only the beginning of a deeper journey for both of them, an awakening to the complexity of the human soul. Life, she reflected, was an eternal learning process, and truth, at times, revealed itself through the simplest and most unexpected messengers, like a crow, to guide us to light, peace, and the essence of humanity. Hope now was not just a feeling, but an unwavering certainty, a beacon illuminating the path of everyone in the small, transformed town. Hope, once a flickering flame, now burned steadily, a beacon for the town, which had found its true essence in kindness and unity. The years that followed wove new stories upon the solid foundation of transformation. The small town, once just a dot on the map, had become a living example of how compassion and truth could rewrite destinies. Mrs. Aurora, with her restored inner peace, felt stronger than ever. Her garden, now lush, was not just a refuge, but a living symbol of resilience. The neighborhood children, who once saw her as a distant figure, now approached her with curiosity and affection, drawn by the crow's stories and the elderly woman's gentle aura. She taught them about plants, about the importance of caring for the earth and living beings, and the crow often perched on her shoulder like a silent master, reinforcing her words. Mrs. Aurora realized that her voice, once almost inaudible, now carried the weight of wisdom and experience, and people listened. Meanwhile, Judge Carolina continued her journey of self-discovery and professional development. The pin, in its velvet box, was a constant reminder that truth did not always manifest in conventional ways. Her intuition, once a whisper, was now a clear and always confident voice that guided her. She began to dedicate part of her time to lectures in schools, speaking about the importance of empathy, active listening, and the search for truth, inspiring young people to look beyond appearances. Her goal was to cultivate a new generation that was more just and compassionate, one that would not be quick to judge. The town, in turn, began to reap the fruits of this new mindset. An old vacant lot, once a site for illegal dumping, became a community project. Inspired by Mrs. Aurora's garden and the judge's words, residents united to transform it into a community garden. Young and old, men and women, worked side by side, planting vegetables and flowers, learning from each other. Mrs. Aurora, with her knowledge, became an informal consultant, advising on the best seeds and care for the land. The crow sometimes flew over the site, like a winged inspector, observing the progress with its bright eyes. Not everything, however, was a bed of roses. A few, still clinging to old habits of distrust and judgment, viewed the community garden with skepticism. They murmured about the futility of the effort or the impossibility of maintaining harmony. One of these was Mr. Osvaldo, a middle-aged man known for his grumpy nature and for never getting involved in anything that didn't bring him direct benefit. He watched the activity from his house window, arms crossed and an expression of disapproval. His resistance, though discreet, was a small obstacle, a reminder that transformation was a continuous process and not everyone embraced change with the same ease. Carolina, aware of these pockets of resistance, knew that true justice was not limited to the courtroom, but extended to building a community where everyone felt they belonged. She observed Mr. Osvaldo from afar, understanding that overcoming distrust was as important a challenge as discovering the truth in a trial. Mrs. Aurora, for her part, with her infinite patience, continued to sow not only in the soil, but in hearts. She believed that kindness, like a seed, needed time and care to blossom, even in the most arid terrains. The community garden, with its strong growing plants, was living proof that human connection, altruism, and persistence could, in fact, transform landscapes and souls. The crow, perched on Mrs. Aurora's shoulder as she helped plant a seedling, seemed to agree, its gaze fixed on the horizon, where the sun rose, promising a new day of hope and work. The small town, with its challenges and victories, was becoming an example of how truth and compassion could rewrite the destiny of a place and its people. That day, the sun seemed stronger over the community garden, and Mr. Osvaldo, from his house window, felt the warmth, but his heart remained cold. He watched the neighbors, young and old, working together, their laughter and conversations sounding like an irritating noise. "Such nonsense," he grumbled to himself, arms crossed over his chest. "Soon the enthusiasm will pass, and everything will go back to what it was, a vacant lot." He didn't believe in selfless kindness, nor in the persistence of community efforts. For him, everything was fleeting, and people's naivety deeply annoyed him. Mrs. Aurora, with her straw hat and hands dirty with soil, planted basil seedlings. Her crow, a dark speck in the blue sky, flew over the site, as if inspecting the progress with its peculiar intelligence. She felt the good energy of the garden, the promise of life in every sprout, but also noticed from afar the rigid figure of Mr. Osvaldo in his window, a silent reminder of resistance. One day, as he walked near the fence that divided his property from the garden, Mr. Osvaldo, distracted by his bitter thoughts and the routine of his solitude, dropped a small object from his pocket. It was an old mother-of-pearl button, which he had kept since childhood, a gift from his deceased mother. He didn't notice the loss and went back inside, oblivious to the small jewel lying in the grass. The crow, with its keen eyesight and innate curiosity for shiny objects, noticed the fallen button. In a swift, silent flight, it picked it up with its beak, an unexpected treasure. It flew towards Mrs. Aurora, landing on her shoulder as usual, a winged confidant. She stroked it gently, and the crow, with a soft caw, dropped the button into her wrinkled palm. Mrs. Aurora examined the object, a simple button, but with a peculiar shine and a delicacy that suggested a story. She looked around, not knowing whose it might be, but feeling that it was something precious. At that very moment, Mr. Osvaldo, searching for the button in his coat and not finding it, felt a pang in his chest. That small object was one of the few links connecting him to sweet memories. He rushed out into the yard, an expression of concern breaking his usual scowl. He scoured the ground with anxious eyes, muttering to himself. Mrs. Aurora, seeing his distress and recognizing the urgency in his gestures, approached the fence, the button in her outstretched hand. "Mr. Osvaldo, does this happen to belong to you?" she asked, her voice soft and welcoming. Mr. Osvaldo stopped abruptly, his eyes fixed on the button. It was his, unmistakable, the same one his mother had sewn onto his first Sunday shirt. A wave of relief and surprise washed over his wrinkled face, undoing the tension that had resided there for so long. Yes, it's mine. Where did you find it?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion, softer than Mrs. Aurora had ever heard. She pointed to the crow, which was perched on a nearby tree branch, observing the scene with its intelligent, piercing eyes. "He brought it to me. I think he found it around here, near the fence." Mr. Osvaldo looked at the crow, then at Mrs. Aurora, and finally at the vibrant garden, where children laughed as they watered plants and neighbors shared seeds and stories. That small button, a link to his past and his mother's love, had been rescued by a messenger as improbable as the one who had saved Mrs. Aurora in court. The cynicism that enveloped him began to unravel, like mist in the morning sun, revealing an inner landscape long forgotten. He felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, gratitude, followed by a deep shame for his own resistance. Judge Carolina, driving down the street, observed the scene from afar. She saw Mr. Osvaldo holding the button, his expression transformed, and Mrs. Aurora smiling gently, with the wisdom of one who understands the complexities of the human soul. The crow on the branch seemed like a silent maestro of that moment. Carolina understood that justice, in its purest form, was the ability to touch people's hearts, to heal invisible wounds, and to connect souls one at a time. This was the climax of the town's transformation, a moment of profound human connection, where a simple act by a winged animal undid years of bitterness. Mr. Osvaldo, with tear-filled eyes, extended his hand to Mrs. Aurora, a gesture of reconciliation. "Thank you, Mrs. Aurora, and thank you, my friend," he said. Looking at the crow with newfound respect, he turned to the garden, and for the first time he saw not nonsense, but the beauty of unity and the promise of a shared future. Mr. Osvaldo, his hand still extended to Mrs. Aurora, felt a strange, long-forgotten warmth spread through his chest. Shame gave way to sincere humility. He squeezed her wrinkled hand, a firm and unexpected gesture. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Aurora," his voice once harsh, now choked with emotion, "for my skepticism, for not believing in your kindness." Mrs. Aurora, with a gentle smile, squeezed his hand back. "It's never too late to start over, Mr. Osvaldo. The garden is always ready for new seeds." The crow on the branch let out a soft caw like an amen. That day, for the first time in years, Mr. Osvaldo did not return to his window. Instead, he walked to the community garden. He watched the children, previously noisy, now focused on the plants. He saw neighbors sharing tools and laughter. He picked up a hoe leaning against the fence, hesitant. Mrs. Elsa smiled, noticing him. "Need help, Mr. Osvaldo? There are a lot of weeds here." He nodded without saying a word and began to weed. Clumsy at first, but soon finding a rhythm. His hands felt the earth, and something dormant within him began to awaken. Mrs. Aurora watched the scene from afar, a satisfied smile on her lips. The crow landed on her shoulder and she stroked it. "See, my friend," she whispered, "kindness is contagious." She approached Mr. Osvaldo, who was sweaty, but had a less tense expression. "You have a way with the earth," she commented. He looked at her, and for the first time his eyes were without bitterness, with a glimmer of hope. "My mother loved gardening," he said, his voice low, almost a secret. she would have liked it here. Judge Carolina, who had witnessed the beginning of the reconciliation, felt a warmth in her chest. That moment proved that justice went beyond sentences, healing the community, one heart at a time. In her office, days later, she reviewed a case of a dispute between neighbors. Instead of focusing on the legal complaints, she invited them to mediation, asking them to talk about their frustrations and what they valued in the neighborhood. Inspired by the garden and Mr. Osvaldo's transformation, she sought the human connection behind the conflict and achieved an agreement of mutual respect. The community garden flourished, not only with vegetables and flowers, but with friendships and understanding. Mr. Osvaldo, once solitary and grumpy, was now one of the most diligent in the garden, sharing valuable gardening memories with the children. He even started bringing coffee for the volunteers, a gesture unthinkable a short time ago. The small town, once marked by distrust and judgment, had transformed into an example of solidarity and overcoming adversity. Mrs. Aurora, on her porch, saw the vibrant garden, Mr. Osvaldo laughing with the children, and felt the peace she longed for. The crow on her shoulder shared her serenity. Truth, she reflected, not only liberates but transforms, healing deep wounds and uniting people in unexpected ways. That trial, which seemed like the end, had been a catalyst for a rebirth, not only for her, but for the entire town. Human connection, altruism, and justice intertwined, creating a tapestry of hope and renewal that promised to endure for many seasons. The small town, with open stories and hearts, was a beacon that kindness sown with patience would always find its way to flourish. The small town, with open stories and hearts, was a beacon that kindness, sown with patience, would always find its way to flourish. And so it was. Months turned into seasons. The community garden, once a vacant lot, was now an oasis of life and unity, overflowing with vibrant vegetables and flowers. Mr. Osvaldo, unrecognizable, became the garden's caretaker, arriving early to water and tend the seedlings. His scowl had been replaced by a discreet smile. His eyes, once dark, shone with the satisfaction of seeing the earth produce and people unite. The children adored him. He told them stories of his mother and her rose bushes, a legacy of tenderness. Mrs. Aurora, in her quiet wisdom, continued to be the soul of the community. Her garden, a mirror of her serene soul, was a refuge of peace. The crow, her faithful companion, perched on her shoulder as she harvested herbs for teas or watched from the mango tree, a silent guardian. The connection between them was palpable, reminding everyone that truth can come from where it is least expected. She no longer felt like a victim, but a force, a matriarch who, through her ordeal, had taught everyone the value of resilience, compassion, and self-acceptance. Judge Carolina bore the indelible mark of that trial. The pin, kept with reverence, was more than just evidence. It was a symbol of her profound personal and professional transformation. Her approach to justice deepened, becoming more human and empathetic. She not only applied the law, but sought to understand the narratives behind conflicts, the invisible wounds that needed healing and reconciliation. Her lectures in schools, once focused on civics, now included the importance of intuition, listening, and the courage to stand up for what is right, inspiring young people to be agents of change. The small town, once marked by distrust, flourished in solidarity and mutual respect. Neighbors helped each other, doors were more open, and the central square, once empty, was now a venue for fairs, gatherings, and celebrations. The story of Mrs. Aurora and the Crow was no longer a legend, but a pillar of the town's identity, a living reminder that faith in human kindness and the pursuit of truth could overcome any adversity, uniting everyone. On a sunny afternoon, Mrs. Aurora and Mr. Osvaldo sat on a bench in the garden, watching the children play. The crow landed gently between them. Mrs. Aurora offered it bread. "Who would have thought, Mr. Osvaldo," she said, with a welcoming smile, "that a small button and a crow would teach us so much about life and the strength of community?" He nodded, a glimmer of gratitude and peace in his eyes. "It's true, Mrs. Aurora. We think we know everything, but life always surprises us with valuable lessons." Judge Carolina, driving by, observed the idyllic scene, her heart filled with serene joy. Justice had been served, yes, but in a grand and transformative way. Not just a verdict, but the healing of the community, the restoration of faith, the transformation of souls. Truth, she knew with unwavering certainty, was a living force that, with courage and compassion, rewrote destinies, united the fragmented, and illuminated the darkest paths. Hope, once a wavering flame, now burned steadily, a beacon for the town, which had found its true essence in kindness and unity. Hope, once a flickering flame, now burned steadily, a beacon for the town, which had found its true essence in kindness and unity. The years that followed wove new stories upon the solid foundation of transformation. The small town, once just a dot on the map, had become a living example of how compassion and truth could rewrite destinies. The community garden, the green heart of the town, flourished exuberantly, a perennial testament to the unity of its residents. Mr. Osvaldo, now with whiter hair and a slower gait, but with a jovial sparkle in his eyes, was the tireless guardian of that space. He arrived at dawn with his watering can and hoe and spent hours tending the plants, talking to the seedlings as if they were old friends. His old scowl had given way to an easy smile, and the solitude that once enveloped him had transformed into a rich web of connections. He taught the children the difference between herbs, the best time to plant, and the joy of harvesting what was sown with care. Mrs. Aurora, with her unwavering serenity, continued to be the wise soul of the community. Her private garden, a microcosm of the community garden, was a sanctuary of peace and beauty. She received visits from neighbors, young and old, who sought her advice on gardening, on life, or simply to enjoy her quiet company. The crow, her faithful and silent confidant, was a constant presence. It perched on her shoulder as she prepared healing herbal teas, or watched her from the top of the mango tree, its intelligent eyes fixed on the town's movements. The connection between them, a bond that defied logic, was a living reminder that truth and wisdom could manifest in unexpected ways, and that nature held deep secrets. Mrs. Aurora felt a peace she had never imagined possible. Immense gratitude for each new dawn and for each seed that sprouted. Judge Carolina, now a few years older, and with a wisdom that transcended her age, continued her professional journey with a renewed passion for human justice. The pin, that small recorder that had changed everything, remained stored in its velvet box, not as a trophy, but as a constant reminder of the fragility of truth and the importance of looking beyond appearances. Her intuition, once a subtle guide, had become an unwavering compass. She had implemented community mediation programs, inspired by the garden and Mr. Osvaldo's reconciliation, seeking to resolve conflicts with dialogue and empathy before they reached the courts. In her lectures, she spoke not only about laws, but about the courage to be vulnerable, to listen to others, and to build bridges. One morning, while reviewing a complex divorce case, Carolina felt a weight in her heart. The emotions were raw, the accusations bitter. It was easy to get lost in bureaucracy, in the coldness of legal articles. But then her eyes fell on the small velvet box on her desk. She opened it, touching the pin. She remembered Mrs. Aurora, the elderly woman's unwavering faith, the crow's intervention. Truth, she reflected, was not always a cold, objective fact. Often, It was a hidden emotion, an unspoken pain, a deep desire to be understood. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them, a new approach to the case formed in her mind, one that prioritized active listening and the search for common ground rather than a legal victory. The town now not only flourished but radiated. The old vacant lot, transformed into a garden, was a symbol of the human capacity to start anew and to nurture what is good. The doors of houses were more open, smiles more sincere, and the sense of community, once shaken, was now an unbreakable bond. The story of Mrs. Aurora and the Crow, told and retold, was no longer just a legend, but the very soul of the town, a testament that kindness, resilience, and human connection were the true seeds of a prosperous future. Hope, which had once been just a distant glimpse, had taken deep root, nourishing every heart and every corner of that small and extraordinary community, a legacy of love and understanding.